Okay, great.
Well, about this meeting. I can't answer to anything else.
Right, okay. Hold on one second. Okay, good evening. This is the Arts Commission meeting for June 17th, 2020, and we're meeting virtually because of COVID restrictions. This is a reminder of our format for discussion. Please keep your microphone muted unless you'd like to ask a question or make a comment. We'll try to use the chat because I can't see you all on the web version. If you could note in a very brief chat that you'd like to speak, I'll try to recognize you and we'll do it that way. And then I will be able to see when you speak. Let's see. Please remain on the video unless you need to take a brief break, and just let us know you're taking a brief break. Let's take it slow with each agenda item and steward our decisions as best we can under these circumstances. Please note that the public has not been invited to attend in real time during this COVID period, but that video, audio, and written versions of this meeting will be made available to the public. We encourage any of you who may watch or listen to this video, audio, or read the minutes to get in touch either individually or collectively with the commission members or with the arts and culture staff to express your thoughts or questions about arts and culture affairs in Boulder. Contact information for commission members and staff is on the website at www.boulderarts.org, or you can email Matt Chazansky, manager of the Office of Arts and Culture, with any questions or comments. And his email is chazansky@boulderlibrary.org. Our first motion is the approval of the agenda. Are there any changes to the agenda? I'll need a motion and a second to approve the agenda or any changes.
I'll make a motion to accept the agenda.
Thank you. That was Bruce Borowski. Do I have a second to the motion?
This is Mark Villarreal. I'll second the motion.
Thank you, Mark. Okay. I think we're ready to, let's see, sorry. Our next order of business is the minutes. Approval of the May 2020 meeting minutes. Are there any changes to the minutes?
Kathleen, if I could interrupt, we still need a vote on the approval of the agenda.
I'm so sorry. Skipped right on there. Okay, so we are voting. How would you like people to do this, through chat then? Or to verbally?
If I could recommend, if you just call out individual commissioners' names and ask for their vote, that might be the most efficient.
Okay, so Mark, what is your vote on the agenda?
My vote is to approve it.
Thank you. Bruce?
Approve.
Okay, Georgia? Is Georgia with us?
There's a G up there.
Do we have, oh, let's see. Well, and it's not going to help me to click on that.
Georgia, you're on mute.
Do we have a quorum if I vote for it and we move on?
Okay, now?
Yeah, we hear you now.
Okay, sorry, I have to switch the device settings. Sorry about that.
Okay, I think Kathleen asked for your vote on the minutes, the agenda.
Okay.
Do you vote to approve the agenda?
Yes.
Okay, great. And I also vote to approve the agenda.
I think Devin's at the meeting now.
I'm here now too. Matt, you're on mute, I think. I vote as well.
Great, thank you. So we have a full house voting to approve the agenda. Thank you. Okay, our next order of business is the minutes. Are there any change, the minutes for the May 2020 meeting? Are there any changes to the minutes? Oh, I should probably mention that before Devin came in, and I don't know whether Georgia might have heard this as well, that I had to join on the web. The app wasn't working for me, so I can't see all of you. And I think the best way to communicate will be for you to, in the chat box, for you to just raise, say, George, you know, I have a question or a comment. And then I'll do that way.
Sorry, I was giving you the thumbs up, but
Yeah, so unless you're talking, I can't see you. Anyone
I
who's
got it.
talking
Okay.
will come up on my screen, but I can't see you either. I don't have full visuals of everybody attending the meeting. So are we okay with that? Let me know in the chat. And Matt's going to keep an eye on the chat as well. Make sure we are always picking up on comments or questions. Okay, do we have, let's see, any changes to the minutes for May? Are you raising your hand, Devin, or?
This is Mark. I have no
No.
changes.
You have no changes?
Scratching.
I did have, does anyone else have changes to the minutes? No. Okay, so this is Kathleen, and I had a couple of questions and comments. Under item 7A, I wondered if this section regarding the CU studio refers to the Oculus, the installation of public art on the hill. And if it does refer to the Oculus, could we state that? Could we refer to that project?
Yeah, we can make that change.
Okay. All right. And then I have a couple of long changes that I previously sent today to Matt and Celia. I can read them aloud. The gist of it is in item 7B, beginning in paragraph 3. This was the discussion we had during May of the COVID-19 Arts and Culture Relief Fund. And I wanted to add a little language in there that explains what it is and what our discussion was about that followed. So beginning with the sentence, Malden, meaning Deborah Malden, emphasized the importance of Boulder being part of the conversation of a Denver metro area grant. The COVID-19 Arts and Culture Relief Fund, a partnership between Bonfield Stanton Foundation and the Denver Foundation, is aimed at helping small and mid-sized arts and culture organizations in Metro Denver. Committing to the fund soon means participation in the first round. Malden said the Bonfield Stanton Foundation is a credible funder and has a core value of cultural equity, which she feels aligns with community values. And if it's possible to put in, a link or two to the grant, I was suggesting that we do that. And then it goes on in the next paragraph. L'Oreal asked about the strategy to combat donor fatigue. Malden noted leveraging the Creative Neighborhoods Fund results, Malden noted leveraging the Creative Neighborhoods Fund results to indicate efficacy. She also believes they have donors who will step up if the city does. And this is language that I would add from here on. Chazansky explained the city's contribution would come from unspent funds, possibly those intended for equity grants, sponsorships, and the CU Arts Administration scholarship. The commission discussed the difficulties presented by COVID of following through on awarding funds, the original intent of the equity funds, when events and internships may or may not be possible. McCormick noted the importance of using equity funds to further equity, and the Bonfield Stanton Foundation has shown commitment to equity. Hughes noted it was a great opportunity for the community. The rest of that paragraph is the same. So I just thought it was important that we talk about where we would find that money. And then in the next paragraph, I would add, Malden said she would represent Create Boulder and BAC's interest in discussions with Bonfield Stanton and the Denver Foundation and report back to staff and BAC. McCormick and Hughes volunteered to represent the Arts Commission in discussions with Boulder. And then the final part of that paragraph is the same. The commission expressed excitement at moving forward with this partnership. Zansky will reach out to the commissioners with next steps and will update on the city's executive budget team. So those.
Yeah, I've added those in just so you know. Thank you.
Okay, great, thank you. And I This was from memory. I didn't go back and listen to it again. So if you feel more comfortable confirming what I said, that's fine. Do we have any other changes to the minutes? No? Okay. Do we have a motion to approve the changes?
I make a motion to approve the May minutes as amended.
Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Okay, I guess I should have asked if there was any discussion about them, but I'm assuming if we have a motion to approve that there is no discussion. Okay, so we have a motion to second. Let's have a vote. Mark, do you approve the minutes as amended?
I do.
Okay, Bruce, do you approve the minutes as amended?
I do.
Great. Devin, do you approve the minutes as amended?
I do.
Okay. Georgia, do you approve the minutes as amended?
I do.
Okay, and I approve the minutes as amended. Great.
Thank you.
Now we'll move on to the public participation part. Due to the nature of our video conferencing software, we're not able to provide for public participation during the meeting. However, this conversation with the community is important to our business. Matt has offered to read any statements from community members in lieu of public comment. Matt, do you have any statements to read?
I didn't receive any statements this month, but I do encourage everyone, if you hear from the community, to send them my way so that we can help people to continue to participate.
Okay, thank you. Yes, please get in touch with commission members or with Matt if you have any thoughts or questions about cultural affairs in Boulder. And again, our contact information is on the website, boulderarts.org. Now we move on to the grant program. And our first action is a follow-up on Angie Ang's Earthware Community Project Grant. Lauren will give a brief statement and introduce Angie.
Hey, everybody. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, great.
Yes.
So just a quick introduction. Angie's here with us. Hi, Angie. And she had received an individual community project grant for $5,000 earlier this year. The last meeting, we had asked her to write a response to some questions you had because she changed her project fairly drastically in response to COVID-19. And as per our the guidelines from the commission, if there's any sort of drastic response changes that are necessary, then we would bring it back to you. So she sent a response, and then the commission still had some more questions. So there's a two-part response now. Her response, or very thorough response, was in the packet for this meeting. And then also we invited Angie here because, as she pointed out, it's really tough to wait a couple months to hear back on what she can work on. So we'll talk about that later. But for now, if we want to discuss her update to her project, if you have any questions for her since she's here, it's nice to have an artist. And there's any discussion, and we hope to wrap it up today so she can get to continue her amazing work.
Before we discuss this, thank you, Lauren. Before we discuss this, would anyone like to make a motion? We would have to have a second to that motion.
A motion for what, Kathleen?
I think that one could make a motion to accept her.
Kathleen?
Yes, Matt?
If I could recommend that you ask any questions or invite the commissioners to ask any questions first, and then have a motion in a second, and then go on to discussion. That might be the best way to proceed.
That's fine. I'm just reading off the script.
Yeah, I understand. Apologies. But yeah, I would invite questions of Angie first, if that's possible.
That sounds totally logical. Okay.
Great.
Does anyone have questions for Angie? Feel free to put them in the chat or to unmute yourself and ask the question.
Well, Angie received our comments from the last meeting, correct?
Yes, that's right.
Okay. Well, I think those comments speak for my concerns. So I have nothing to add. I would just like to hear Angie.
Should I speak now?
Sure.
Okay, I actually did respond to the questions because normally I wouldn't be at this meeting. So it was about 2 pages long. And those were actually amended in the course of a month a few times. So thanks, Lauren, for receiving all those amendments. So a lot has transpired. Good things since April. Mostly because of every week there are changes to COVID and regulations, city and state, federal wide. So in April, it would be probably impossible to do this project with homeless due to the regulations in April, but that has completely changed. So I was able to contact a few organizations that focus on people in transition in the homeless population. So that took quite a while to get back to because we were still shelter in place. But fortunately, I do have a partnership with Mother House. So Mother House is for women who are pregnant and they're in shelters and in transitional housing. So I already actually had a workshop with them on Monday. And even if the funding wasn't approved, I had already promised that I would do this project to the HOA in North Boulder. So I was doing it with or without funds. And, you know, this project takes, you know, quite a few months just to organize like the partners and the materials. And with COVID, it was extremely difficult to do that. And I had written, I don't know if everybody had read those responses, but I've literally spent already 300 hours on the project, and it'll probably take another 300 hours. A lot of that is because I'm doing online workshops, which also require tutorials. So making those video tutorials is like over 100 hours. And then the workshops, because I'm confined to doing it online at the organization's programming, they're only 1 to 1.5 hours long, especially because they're mothers and they're pregnant. They only have really like an hour to spare in between, you know, dealing with some of them have 3 children as well as they're pregnant. So it's a lot to juggle. So I was thinking that I would work with multiple organizations. So this is also why it's going to take longer, because with only 1 hour workshops, originally they were like 3 to 4 hour workshops at a time with a consistent group. That can't happen because the original members were part of an art group that went to some free workshops at the library. The library is closed. The woman who held these workshops, there is a senior, she's not familiar with anything online, and she didn't want to do anything online. Also, the participants were coming from multiple organizations. Their housing was varied. Some of them were on the street, some of them were in mental institutions and group homes. So it would be pretty impossible to get that group together. So it has to remain online for now, and probably for the duration of the program. So I have also thought about maybe working with teenagers, doing the online classes. Even if I'm working with multiple organizations, it's really hard to get groups together right now. Really hard, because I'm not only doing this project, I'm doing 2 other community art projects, and it is a tremendous effort to get families and people involved in extracurricular activities. If it doesn't involve them making money or having them, you know, take care of their children online, even that has been difficult, because children and teenagers, when they're doing things on the internet, don't necessarily pay attention the whole time. So it usually requires like parental assistance. Also, the tree wraps are still going to happen with recycled materials. I had to adapt the aesthetic and materials as well, because it's piecemeal. It's not like a mural where we're all together in the same space, where we're working on it and then it's finished. It has to be things that are worked on separately and they're sewn together like a quilt. So this changes it a little bit. So I had done an experiment with the e-waste one with a neighbor who was one of the president of the HOA in North Boulder. And that was also to test like how long it would take, how difficult it was, how heavy it was, with the materials I had collected since January. And then we had decided it was actually quite heavy and very, very time consuming to sew each little tiny piece of e-waste on there. So I decided that what materials can I use that also people who aren't necessarily artists can actually make. So that's when the idea of the plastic tote bags and weaving those together, similar to yarn bombing, but it's the plastic tote bags. So that was a change in the proposal as well. So I guess the main change now is I am still working with the homeless. I have located a partner. I'm still talking with Attention Homes. It's going very slowly because my contact at Attention Homes, I've been in contact with them since January. We already confirmed working together, but its programming has been really disrupted because of COVID. And the teenagers, she said the numbers are really low because of COVID. They have less runaways, which is good, but it's good and bad because obviously those runaways are usually running away because of domestic violence. But that's the case with Attention Homes is irregular programming, inconsistency of attendance. So even though they're interested, organizing a group of teens, even if it's 5 people, has been difficult with them on their end because I'm ready. It's just I'm waiting for them. So that's where it stands right now.
Thank you.
Yeah, sure.
Are there other questions for Angie? Any comments? I have a comment. I wanted to say that I was very impressed with Angie's response. It was very thoughtful, very thorough. And frankly, I was taken aback. I had to read it a couple times to understand how much time you put into this project. I believe you said over 600 hours is your estimation. And I know that, lots of our performing arts groups might spend that kind of time, but this is a piece of installation art that I'm very much looking forward to seeing. And I had no idea it would be that time consuming. And I realize a lot of that is the sort of corralling people under very difficult circumstances to participate in the project and then to adapt it to virtual workshops, as that's my understanding, and to the actual physical work that you're doing. So I really appreciate that you took the time to appear tonight and to explain things so thoroughly. And I see that you're moving ahead, against all odds, you're moving ahead with Attention Homes and Mother House. So my feeling is that you're fulfilling the intent of your grant. So I appreciate hearing in detail about how that's going. I wish you great luck with it. Okay, are there any, let's see, I'm just looking at the chat. Mark mentioned, I thought that Angie's written response was very detailed. I'm happy with her explanations. Bruce says, I agree with Mark. Mark says, I agree with Kathleen. Georgia or Devin, do you have any comments that you'd like to make verbally, audibly, or in the chat?
No, I'm good.
No.
What I wrote was in response to something that they had mentioned earlier about other people contacting.
Commenting. I'm sorry, I didn't catch that in time. I apologize.
That's okay. I was typing as fast as I could, but
no worries. I just didn't catch it fast enough. It's frustrating technology for sure. But Matt followed up and said, just send me the comments. And that's probably the best thing. That's what I usually do. If somebody contacts me personally, I send it on. I usually give a brief response and say, I'm referring you to Matt, or I'm referring you to the staff.
Okay.
Comments, yeah. Particularly if it's a question that if you know the answer, you're always welcome to respond to people.
Yeah, no, someone emailed me. He's got a piece of artwork that he wants to donate.
Oh, yeah, we all got that email.
Okay, I couldn't see in there. It didn't show if it was sent to multiple people. I would assume that they would. I don't know why they would select me only since I'm.
So the other recipients were blocked on my email.
Mine too, yeah.
Yeah.
I referred that to the staff and said, thank you for thinking of us. It's lovely that you'd like to share your art. I'm going to refer you to Matt, Lauren, and Mandy.
Yeah, there's a whole budget that needs to go along with it for maintenance and installation and all of that stuff.
Yeah, and a lot of criteria before we ever get to accepting it. I mean, it has to go through a panel that approves it and all that stuff. So yeah. So that was the right response.
So Kathleen, can I say one other thing I forgot to mention?
Sure.
So at the end of my response, so the first response, the schedule was the same. The second response, I said, is it possible that the commission is flexible with the deadline? I know I'm not obligated until I think it was May 2021. Due to COVID, social unrest, the economic crisis, it's I try to plan things and things get constantly shifted because it's a community project and I'm completely dependent on multiple people. So my goal is to have it installed in August in North Boulder and September in Boulder Central Park. But if that can't happen for any reason, is it possible I do it in the spring 2021?
Does anyone, any of the commissioners have a problem with that? Is this how we can respond? Lauren, please. Yeah, Lauren, say something.
I just wanted to clarify that community projects generally have a 1.5 years that you need to complete them in. So when we asked initially, the deadline could have been June 30th of next year. So it would even be within the community projects 2020 normal cycle if it were to be in the early of next year.
Okay.
Well, Angie, I'll also add that we've only had one other community project that was late, and it was worth the wait. And I think that you will also be worth the wait. So I don't have any concerns about the timeline having to be adjusted.
And
great.
I have a very quick question before we vote, unless there are any other comments. It is a technical question. You mentioned that you were hand sewing, I believe hand sewing all these pieces together. Is there any other way to adhere them? Is it not acceptable to use crazy glue because I'm just I'm a sewer and I was thinking about all the intense effort involved in sewing all these.
It's a really good question. Not all of them will be sewn on. There will only be 2 that have the e-waste. The one of them that has the e-waste, I'm working with someone to have it be interactive. So that's an addition, but it's a perk really to have one where when you get close to the tree, it has information about creative reuse and the tree kind of talks to you. So that would actually be installed in the Boulder Central Park, not in the HOA, the North Boulder, just because with technology and interactivity, it tends to break often. So we want to do a lot of testing, and I don't want it to break in North Boulder before we get it to Central Park. In terms of the sewing, I've done a lot of interactive projects, and once you put things out in the public, it kind of has to be indestructible. These are not indestructible. Somebody could take a pair of scissors and cut it up. Somebody could take spray paint on. It's public art. So it's for me, it's something that's ephemeral and I cross my fingers. Little parts can be glued on. We have it glued and sewn. And that's so that people don't, mess with it. And it just prevents them from easily pulling it off. But they can still pull it off. They can cut it, right? But yeah, that's why I'm not going to do all of them with the e-waste as well. And I thought that it's something that the time-wise, it would take probably over 1,000 hours if I had the e-waste. That's why some of them are going to be done with the weaved plastic tote bags. So there's no way for me to reduce the amount of time unless the workshops are longer and they're combined with many people. And I'm reticent about that, of of having like 20 people in a Zoom conference. And also the levels are different. You know, I want to start a relationship with one organization and sort of keep it more intimate. And then if it changes to more teenagers, then that's a completely different group. So I don't want to mix. So it'll just be how it is. I did the rabbit art project. If you heard of that project, that took 200 hours. That was crazy. It was just rabbit art on the public walls, but we had no idea what it would be like organizing people during COVID. And anybody organizing anything cultural extracurricular right now, they say it's like pulling teeth to get the community organized. So it's the way it is.
Well, thank you for charging ahead with it. I look forward to seeing it, and I hope people will respect your installation. So, are there any other questions or comments for Angie? I don't hear or see any. Do we have a motion to, let's see, are we making a motion to accept? Let's see, would anyone like to make a motion to accept Angie's update, follow up on her project, and to approve her project as she's described it?
I would like to make a motion to approve Angie's responses to our questions and to move forward with funding her project.
I'll second.
Okay, that was Bruce seconding. Thank you, Mark and Bruce. Do we have a vote now? Mark, do you approve Angie's project?
I approve Angie's project.
Bruce, do you approve Angie's project?
Yes.
Devin, do you approve Angie's project?
Yes. Yes.
And Georgia, do you approve Angie's project?
Yes.
Okay, great. And I, Kathleen, also approve Angie's project, and I wish you great luck with it.
Yes.
Great. Thanks so much.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you, Angie.
Thanks, Angie.
Thanks for inviting me to the meeting. Thanks for supporting my project too.
Welcome.
And your patience.
We're happy
I'm
to.
looking to it. Thank you.
Thank you for compassion right now.
Thanks.
Okay, great.
Kathleen, if I could just have,
Yes, Lauren. Oh, Lauren, you want to say something again, please?
yeah, just to close this topic as well. Angie can stay with us, of course, because it's a public meeting, but you don't have to. So just to close this topic, though, we would like to, and we spoke with this, Kathleen, about having artists attend. So if there are questions in the future, I imagine there will be, we would ask them to send a written response to your questions and have it in the packet like this time, but then ask them to attend the next meeting so it doesn't delay the process by a month or 2 months, so they can get working on their projects. Does anybody, I don't think we have to vote on that, right, Matt? Or, okay, it would just be sort of like we'll go forward with that until it becomes a problem.
Yeah, we use that new practice, and just as a reminder to everyone that you all voted to approve Lauren to have a little bit more authority to approve some non-substantive changes. So this will only be if something happens to significantly change a project that we feel it's changing the nature of the application itself. Then we'll use Lauren's new process.
Yes, I totally agree.
That makes a lot
All
of
in
sense.
favor
Thank
for
you.
giving Lauren more power.
Bye.
Aye.
Thank you all very much.
This was difficult because it was delayed, what, 2 or 3 months? The whole process for it?
It was 2 or 3 months, and it actually sort of worked out because things are loosening again now. It was like
Right.
circular, but it was really tough for her to slow down. She didn't slow down. So essentially she was working for the commission without being funded yet, right? So we'll make sure that happens as little as possible. Thank you, everybody.
Okay. Our next order of business is commission business. And according to the agenda, we have organizational relationships. This is something, I actually have 2 items here. I probably should have suggested amending the agenda for the second item, but I did not. So if we have to put that off for another meeting, the second point, we can do that. It's about organizational relationships, and it's about liaisons with being liaisons with arts organizations. I believe last fall we voted as a commission to change the way that we had been not so much change the way we've been interacting, but we agreed not to have such formal liaison ties with specific organizations. Previously, in the last several years that I've been on the Arts Commission, each Arts Commissioner chose 3 or 4 organizations and established like a personal relationship with the executive director of the Boulder Philharmonic, or a local theater, whatever. And a couple times a year, some people did it more, some people did it less. You'd have a phone conversation, or you'd meet for coffee, and you'd talk briefly about how things were going and how they were fulfilling their grant. Were there any problems? How are things going? Any issues they wanted the commission to know about? And when I first started, we were doing little reports, just a paragraph from each organization. And I think that was a big impact for a lot of, all of us are working. I'm assuming all of us are working. A lot of us have family commitments, or at least several of us do. And it got to be a lot for a commission member. So last fall we voted to discontinue that. But I wondered, and I wondered whether any other commissioners share the desire to establish a little closer relations, particularly at this time when everyone feels kind of isolated. If we could check in I'm proposing that we each check in with several organizations and we can figure out who those are and just kind of email them every, 3 or 4 months and say, how's it going? Or I realize this is a difficult time. Can we chat for a few minutes? We could do that by phone, or we could meet, depending on your time commitments and their time commitments. And I think we might show a lot of support for the arts and culture community by doing that again. And also, I think it's good for the commission to kind of have a bead on what's happening with our organizations that we run. But I thought we might just put it out for just a brief discussion and see what you all are willing to do, the pros and cons of having a stronger liaison relationship.
This is Bruce.
Yeah.
I'd be totally into that. I like the idea of reaching out. I like people having a connection to the Arts Commission and not feel like it's this us and them thing. I think this has traditionally been done in the past with larger organizations. So if I were to move forward, my personal preference would be to work with like medium-sized organizations that maybe need that little bit of hands-on so they can try to aspire to the next level and maybe one day become a large organization. So maybe they need a little bit more mentorship than the large organizations need.
Okay, thank you. Would anyone else like to comment on either pro or con to reestablishing a little stronger liaison relationship with groups?
This is Mark speaking. I love the liaison function. I'm currently on the Beck sisters and Pesha Rudnick, and then Dianella from the opera. They call me whenever they want to, and I think you all when we sign up for this, we have to embrace the pushback and the criticism, and that's what I try to encourage. And if you all read Pesha's letter, she's not bashful, about the decisions that we made at that last meeting. But that's what helps us be more responsive and be more responsible with our charge. And so I'm all for it. I've been doing it informally. It's just sort of been, I don't pester anybody. I just let them know if they have a question, call me. And I try to get together with them after they've gotten their grant. Just congratulate them personally.
Okay, so I take it you'd be in favor of continuing this? And
yeah, I've already got my posse.
You've got your posse.
Yeah.
Okay, great.
I might have time to add one more since I'm no longer the chair.
Or two.
I think everybody on the commission needs to take stock of being in a good position to hear the criticism, and that you encourage it so that they feel you get a more honest back and forth.
Devin or Georgia, do you have any thoughts on this?
Yeah, this is Georgia. I love that idea. That was one of my favorite parts of being on commission the last time I was in Encinitas, is I contacted all of the dance studios in the area and brought them together with a few performances, and then I just made connections with them, and it was I really enjoyed personally making the connection. And then, you know, if they had questions, if they had someone in the commission, so that their questions would go directly to the right place. You know, sometimes when you're running a business and you see this organization that's there to help you, but you don't know who to contact and how to contact, and you have an idea, but you don't know, is this something I can say it's going to happen in a month, or I have to have this idea and it's going to go through in a year? To have a relationship with someone who you know and trust, to be able to say, I have this idea, I want to do this thing, and to kind of like Angie, I think her name was saying, like she sent her letter and then it took months to get a response, you know, for a variety of different reasons, but just to be able to have one person, you've got their number in your phone, call them, and even if the response is, yes, that sounds interesting, let me get back to you in a month, at least then you know, instead of every day wondering, is it going to happen today? Is it going to happen today? And I like Mark's idea of reaching out to people, because the large organizations have it down. They have their funding coming in. Getting in touch with people who are smaller and trying to start out, because I see a lot of artists that come into town, are amazing, they don't have the funds to go big or the resources, and then they disappear. And it keeps our arts scene doing the same thing over and over again, instead of seeing like a lot of diversity. So yeah, I would definitely be up for putting myself out there as a contact, and contacting a few people to let them know I'm here.
Great. Great. And you have a specialty and are a dancer and a dance instructor. So it's wonderful to have that connection to the dance community here.
Yeah. I actually wanted to bring something up, and I probably maybe need to talk to Matt later, but I've had a few people reach out to me this week as the gyms are opening, because I was teaching dance in the gyms. Because the capacity is so small, very few of the dancers are able to get in for fitness and connection, and like the mental health that comes along with group dance. So the community is not able to get what they need. The teachers are not able to get in and teach because there's such limited classes. And I attended an outdoor class at Martin Park, and it was a really amazing experience of community and connection. And then I had a few people after that reach out to me asking for me to do the same. So I would like to put something together that gets some dance teachers working in public spaces, so that more people can start attending and making connection. And like I said, the mental health piece of it, one of my clients is a psychologist, and she's just like the mental health damage that's going on right now from the isolation is a pretty big deal. And so this is one way that we can help ease the pain there. So I don't know who I talked to about that to get something like that put together.
So Matt is happy to follow up on that, Georgia.
Okay. Oh, I see.
I love that idea. That is wonderful. Yeah, I'm looking forward to doing something like that. I missed my yoga class at the rec center. But thank you. That would be great. So, so it sounds like you're in favor of taking on maybe. Do you think it's appropriate to handle 3 or 4 organizations, or would you feel comfortable reaching out to everyone in the dance community? Or, I mean, in terms of the people we fund, would you feel comfortable reaching out to the dance organizations that we fund already?
Yes, absolutely. And many of them I already know,
No,
have
yeah.
a relationship with. So,
Great. All right. So, Devin, what do you think?
I think it's a great idea. I can't remember when we decided to stop doing it, and I would echo Bruce's idea that we focus on maybe some of the medium or smaller organizations that might not know the ropes as much, that might not understand as much about how to apply for grants, and maybe have the staff or the resources to do it. So.
Great. Okay, I'm in favor of it. I obviously made the proposal, but I, for several years, have been meeting or talking with 4 groups. I just the MOPA last year because I went on the board to represent the Arts Commission. I know that Mark is also on the Dairy Board. So Mark actually has an additional group, but I have been working with the Boulder Philharmonic, Betsy Theater, Boulder Ensemble Theater Company, Naval Arts District, and gosh, there's one other that I'm forgetting. But it was actually a medium group, and then 2 large groups. So, and I would love to continue with them just because we've established a relationship. But I certainly would be open to, if someone else really wanted to work with those groups, I would be open to taking on other groups. And so I'm wondering whether maybe Lauren or Matt or someone with the staff could help us maybe send out a Google Doc and we could sign up that way. How would you suggest to do it?
We can absolutely, before the next meeting, get together the list of organizations, circulate that so that you can start to think about it. Okay. And then just in July, we can discuss how to break that up. I did want to just say a few words about that. First of all, I obviously think it's a fantastic idea. We instituted this in 2016 when we established the new grants program. And it was all part of recommendations out of the cultural plan about how to make these grants the most effective that they can be. And this type of relationship building it's far more than a best practice. It's sort of like an ideal practice to be supportive in a lot of different ways. And that is something that just makes sure that your return on your investment of the grants is more assured. And it's something that for like a big organization like, Bloomberg Philanthropy or the Ford Foundation, where they have hundreds of staff, is something that they do as a standard. It's not typically done with something of our size, and especially of a community grant program where you are volunteering for this. And so I do want to make sure that we're thoughtful over the next month as you think about organizations that you want to connect with and how you want to structure this, that it is more work on what is already for you, for a volunteer, a lot of work in this serving on this commission. That one of the reasons we decided to take a pause on liaison positions this year was that not only that burden on you, but also that staff had taken on certain liaison positions previously, and that turned out to create a bit of an inequity. There were certain organizations that had access to commissioners, or at least there was this appearance of having different kinds of access to commissioners. And so we wanted to be very thoughtful about that fact and making sure that however we administer this, it's done so that everyone who is a general operating support grant recipient really does have the connection. And part of that too was that different commissioners will engage in this relationship in different ways, and we sort of need to acknowledge that. Before, we had this sort of unspoken rule that you would write a report to put into the minutes, and then everyone could read it, or into the packet, and everyone could read it and be on the same page with sort of updates on liaison relationships. And that became a lot of work too, of writing those, even twice a year, 3 times a year. That was a lot of work too. I'm not sure how effective I don't know if it helped or not. But I think the main thing that is helpful in this is just that first reaching out and saying, I am available to you in whatever way you as an organization want to take advantage. So I think just your willingness to do that much is a really big deal. But I also want to make sure that we understand that this is part of a program to support organizations. We have a person who is a professional who does this work, and that's Lauren, and she can't represent the commission, but she does hear from the nonprofits all the time. And we also have the nonprofit summits that happen quarterly, where we all get together with all of them, and professional development work that we're supporting. So your ability to reach out with them doesn't need to be everything. It needs to be about your business and the work that you want to get done, and know that there's a lot of other things going on. So if we do put this together for July, I want to make sure that we talk about what your responsibilities are to that, and make sure that they're limited in just the right way. Thank you.
Yeah, and I might want to just add something to what Matt said, because I think the only danger is that it could be perceived, if some organizations have relationships with commissioners and some don't. There could be a perception of inequality there. So if there's a way, and maybe that's having a commissioner rotate, or maybe a commissioner doesn't stay with the same organization more than a year or something like that. Just if there's some way that it can be so every organization that is receiving grants feels like they have the same access. And then the second caveat, I think, and I admit this as much as anyone, I think a couple of my relationships weren't as engaged as they could have been, just because it was one of those things that when time is limited, I always tried to check in, and usually would have organizations send some kind of report that I could share with the commission. But that is a fear in the back of my mind that I might neglect that duty in some way, especially with COVID, where every single extra hour of mine is trying to figure out, how the orchestra field responds to COVID, and that's turning into a more than full-time job now. So those are, I think, my only two additions or caveats to that.
Thank you, Devin. And that is a concern. Maybe we should rotate, although it's really nice once you finally get some kind of relationship going with these organizations and they feel comfortable enough to call you or email you when something's bothering them. But I think you could see it both ways, and we can discuss it further. I did wonder how many groups we have altogether. I should have counted them. How many GOS groups do we have? And then
we have 37 now.
37. Okay.
Mm-hmm. So it would be about 7.4 organizations per commissioner if you want to divide them up between yourselves.
Yeah, and there's obviously no way we're going to get everybody. I wonder if it's worth us emailing them and asking, like, who's interested in this? That way we're not contacting people that aren't even interested. We don't want to waste anybody's time.
It's a great idea.
And again, I just want to emphasize, I have no interest in, well, I have some interest in working with large groups, but my interest, my personal interest lies in working with small and medium size.
I think you're going to get that job, Bruce.
You got it.
Just from a practicality standpoint, the next meeting we're going to be deciding on the, we're working through the arts education grants, correct?
That's right.
We may not have a whole lot of time.
Okay.
Put on this until maybe the retreat is when we just dial down on it.
Or August, if we don't have a big agenda in August. Yeah. Yeah, I just wanted to put that thought in people's heads and how to think about it if we all agree that it's maybe. Are there any other comments or questions? This is not something we vote on, then. This is just an idea for discussion. Is that correct, Matt?
Yeah, you don't need to vote on anything right now. I think what I'm hearing is Lauren and I will work on circulating the list, and so that you can consider. If it's all right with all of you, we'll have people tell us who they're interested in. If there's a couple commissioners interested in one group or one group that doesn't have someone interested, then you can fight that out at the next available agenda.
Okay.
But I'm going to second what Mark said about possibly considering this as we consider be leading up to the retreat and our work on next year's grant cycle, just because that will be year 3 of the GOS funding, and we're going to be spending a lot of time next year working on the following year and getting organizations ready to reapply. So it's a good year to sort of reintroduce those.
Right. I hear you. I think Lauren might have just said that the arts education decisions were made at the August meeting. So maybe next month, I actually would like to see us discuss this earlier rather than later, because I think people are really looking for connection now. And, you know, these are such unusual times that if they can get a sympathetic voice who can just listen to them on the other end, I think it's really important, if for nothing else, to help keep people in the arts and culture sane and know that there is, you know, there's a hopeful future eventually. Okay, so we'll put that to rest for a bit. The other thing that I wanted to bring up was the length of the meetings. And I talked this over with Matt, and Matt had a very good explanation for, you know, we can do it one way or the other. We often have, particularly during the grant cycles, we have sometimes very long meetings, and that's understandable because we have to hear from everybody and we have to rescore and so forth. I'm one of the people who's perhaps most guilty of asking a lot of questions, and so I know that I probably delay meetings, but I'm also aware that if it's possible, we'd love to keep meetings to a couple hours instead of 3 or 4 when they sometimes go longer with the grant. And I asked Matt how we could accomplish that. Is it possible to put more information in the agenda packet so that we would have more background coming to the meeting and perhaps wouldn't sit through presentations? As much as we love hearing about all the programs, I just wondered whether that was an option. And so I wonder, Matt, if you could give us kind of the two scenarios as you explained them to me.
Yeah, absolutely. What we've been doing for quite some time now is loading information into the meeting itself through the presentations, through discussion. And that certainly is helpful for, you know, people in the community who kind of float into our meetings and attend to see exactly what's going on, get the detail. It's also been helpful for commissioners who wish to spend a lot of the thought in the meeting itself, and that has been the personality of the commission. There are other ways of doing it, though, and I'm happy to explore what goes on in other commissions and how they manage their time. But one thing that we have brought up in the past is the idea of providing a lot more detailed information in the packet and providing that packet a bit earlier, and then organizing a way to collect thoughts or questions, answer some questions before the meeting, obviously all captured for the public record, so that by the time you get to the meeting, that there isn't a lot of need for extensive detailed presentations or a lot of questions. There certainly is room for questions and public hearing and discussion, but we can do a lot of that on the front end. What it would require is a little bit more work for staff to manage a little bit longer of a process for ahead of each meeting, which is not a problem. But it would also mean that commissioners would commit to that process as well, of reading in detail, of following up with us afterwards. And David, I don't mean to put you on the spot, but do you want to talk about how the Library Commission does it and if you see it as a more efficient model?
You know, their meetings, they obviously are not doing grants. Yeah, we do a full packet, and many of the commissioners write all of their questions in ahead of time. So that helps facilitate the meeting, because then there's no need for us. We can usually respond to those quickly in the course of the meeting or prior to the meeting, especially things like minutes and that kind of things. Those are things that they always send their corrections in ahead of time.
Mhm.
after the, and the packet doesn't go out that early. It goes out, I think, the Thursday prior to, so a week. Commissioners have a week with the packet.
So is it a requirement that library commissioners get back to you to make sure that they've read it, I guess, and understand?
It's not a requirement, Kathleen. It's a process that they initiated in order to streamline their meetings, I think.
Uh-huh.
And not every commissioner writes in notes.
And what do you see as the major advantages of that way of proceeding?
Well, if I could say, it is just what you're saying. It's to make sure that the commissioners come into the meeting with information provided, and that staff have, either before the meeting or during the meeting are ready for the questions that are presented, so that the discussion part of it, the question answer and the discussion part of it is much more concise. I think, there's also an argument to be made that, we can certainly tighten up our presentations, provide a lot of information in the packet, and then assuming that you all read it, just give you the basic presentation on the key points and the decision that needs to be made. And that could also be a way to make sure that the meetings are run efficiently.
Mark, can I put the Office of Arts and Culture on the spot for a second?
By all means.
Okay, so I would like an honest answer from Celia, Lauren, Mandy, and Matt. Does this commission still spend way too much time talking about things we've already decided?
I will be bold enough to take the first answer on this and say things have actually improved quite a bit. That I can't say that I could put my fingers on what we've changed to make this happen, but this group of people has been able to be much more efficient about setting agenda items and sticking to them. And we've been able to still revisit issues like the liaison positions when it's necessary, without rediscussing decisions that have been made. So, I feel like that has gotten better.
So there is some improvement.
I agree. Yes, I agree with that. I welcome Lauren and Mandy and Celia to disagree at this time.
Yes. How many comments?
Recognizing that it's an issue at all was a good kind of self-reflection, I think, has prevented that from being as much of an issue.
Mm-hmm. Lauren or Mandy, do you have any thoughts on this?
I think that the grants process and shifting it to away from the spoken is going to help a lot, and we're just getting used to it now. And unfortunately, we had to go digital, but I think when we're back in person, and you're used to that process, it's going to make that part at least a lot faster.
I agree with everything that's been said, and I appreciate how right now we're kind of more of a little bit more nimble, just because we're getting to know each other a little bit better once again with new leadership and also with the new commissioner. But I think, just to echo, we've done a much better job of being efficient and revisiting things when we need to.
So, Georgia or Devin, do you have any questions about as I see it, backing things up a bit, getting the agenda packet a little bit early, more detailed, and having shorter presentations and discussions, maybe shorter discussions during the meetings, versus the way we've been doing it, which is getting us some information and then getting more information in the meeting. And is there, does that fit with the way you like to make decisions? I, for example, am someone who likes information. I'm a writer and editor, and it's kind of what I've been doing my whole life, is to research things, think about them, and then come up with questions. So for me, getting a packet earlier that's more detailed would probably make me not ask so many questions, but because I'd have already had them answered and I could think about it before I vote. But I understand that a lot of you might be much more nimble and be able to just process it faster and be able to make your decisions and vote in the moment at the meeting much more easily. So And I totally get that, but I just wondered whether you had thoughts about what you might prefer. It's a bigger time commitment earlier in the cycle if we changed it and had more information in the packets, and you'd really have to be very thorough about reading them, coming up with questions and stuff. But do you have a thought on what you might prefer?
Well,
George.
okay, so I'll go ahead and tell you my thoughts. And the only thing I have, since this is only my third meeting,
Mm-hmm.
you know, so what I have to compare it to is my previous experience, and we did have more members on the commission. I am not still very clear on how the roles are divided here, but I will tell you that our meetings, I believe, were only 1 hour.
Wow.
And I actually just found my arts commission. I had a big binder that they gave us, and it has all the packets in there. I could look them over to see if they're more detailed, or but yes, getting the packet earlier would help a lot. And I noticed that in these meetings, you all take the time to talk about what you think about a situation and in all of your thoughts around it, where we did not do that at all. It was just like, here's this issue, this is what it is, let's vote. We voted, here's this issue, and we already knew what they were, so we all knew how we were gonna vote, and that was it. And the grant process, so I came in on the end of yours, but ours was, I remember we received a packet, each person, and it was all listed, and we put, we graded each one by number, and then we added up the numbers, and that was it. And there was no more discussion after that. However, ours was different in the sense, if I remember correctly, they had to do the project, they submitted receipts, and then they got reimbursed at the end. So I'm happy to share anything, the paperwork that I have, if anyone wants to look at it. And but yes, for me, definitely, since we're all busy, but I have 3 children. So if I could get that packet earlier, I would be able to read it more thoroughly before coming into the meeting. I think that would help.
Devin, how about you?
I think anything that shortens some of the longer meetings would be helpful. I don't know. I think the packets are already pretty detailed, so maybe it's about including more action items in the packet. But I would agree. Yeah, I'm open to trying something new.
Okay. And Bruce, do you have thoughts on this?
Yeah, I mean, I've been to a ton of board meetings over the years, and I prefer the ones that are shorter in length overall, obviously. So I think a big part of it is getting the information ahead of time so that we're all adult professionals. We can look through it, and that way we can use the time that we're all together to talk about it and, obviously vote, but to discuss. Maybe something bothers us about something. That's the time to be doing it, not to see a 20-minute PowerPoint presentation of something we could have read a couple days ago and be all ready to talk about.
Okay, great. So you might be, you would be in favor then of having a more comprehensive packet and backing it up a little bit, spending a little more time with the agenda packet and presenting questions ahead of time, or rather than discussing that all in the meeting. Is that what I'm gathering?
Yeah, I mean, I guess discussion ahead of the meeting, between the time we get the packet and the actual meeting, that, I'd go both ways on that.
Yeah.
I'm more concerned that we get all the information and we can discuss it at the meeting. If people want to talk about stuff ahead of time, that's fine. It's all open to the public, so it's not like we're doing it behind people's backs, which is very important that we don't do. So yeah, I have no problem, I guess, with discussion ahead of time, as long as it's done properly.
Kathleen, Matt has some next steps proposed.
Oh, can I just add something real quick? I just want to be clear. I think, again, I've been on a lot of boards. I think that the packets that we get are wonderful. right now, as is. So, if you want to add stuff to it, wonderful, all the better. But I got no complaints about the existing packets.
Great. Okay. And I had one more quick question. I wonder if there's one way or the other, a particular value for the public record. Additional piece about the programs and projects that are being handled by the commission and the staff is one way more effective than the other.
I didn't understand the question.
So the question is, if we have a bigger packet and maybe some questions via email before the meeting, is that better for public record and for full disclosure, full transparency than waiting for the meeting? A lot of people don't attend the meetings, right? And when we have normal meetings in real time where we're all there, just one way of doing the packet and preparing for the meetings allow more for the public record, more educational value, more transparency, or does it not really matter? So I thought maybe the staff might have a thought on that. Or
yeah, Kathleen, I'll respond to that. I don't know if it matters one way or the other as far as the public record is concerned. It'll all get captured. Mm-hmm. I think the only thing is the degree to which you have discussion before the meeting, even if we do capture for the public record. Is it something that someone can see before the decision is made, right? And so we would have to think that part through. But perhaps it's something that we can try. We can come up with a way to do it. So if you don't mind, then I'll talk about what I think might be some good next steps along those lines. Is if Georgia, I take you up on that offer to take a look at some of the documents that you've retained and see what, I'm always ready to learn from others. But Kathleen and I can work on this process next week and roll it out for the next meeting. We'll let everyone know ahead of time what we're going to be doing and when you're going to be getting documents so that it's not a surprise. But then we'll just take 15 minutes of the next meeting to circle back and make sure that's working and tweak where necessary or abandon it if no one likes it. But it's something that, Kathleen, you as the chair, you can take the authority to structure how you want that to play out. So we'll work on that together.
Okay, great. Thank you, Matt. Does anyone have, any of the commissioners have anything else to bring up? Anything you'd like to see happen over the next couple months? I'm not hearing anything. So I guess we'll go on to the matters from staff.
Thank you very much. So I will ask if there are any questions about my memo and the staff updates. I did want to point out a couple things that have been transpiring very recently. I sent an email earlier about the process for the city council to put on the November ballot the increase of the number of arts commissioners to 7. So take a look at that email. Let me know if you have questions. We'll include that email in the next packet as part of the correspondence. But the next big date will be July 21st for the public hearing on that. Also a quick follow-up that wasn't in the staff updates about the Create Boulder collaboration. There were a few fits and starts to get that established, but we are moving forward funding the city's portion of that collaboration. And Deb Malden has already been in one meeting to help with the decision-making process and has been, just sent us an update today to Devin and Kathleen and myself. So that is going ahead as we discussed. Are there any other questions about the memo that I provided?
I did have a question. So I would say it's great news that we'll be getting 2 more, hopefully we'll be getting 2 more commission members. That will really lighten the load for all of us, I think. And it'll be wonderful to have 2 more voices from the arts community represented. the city of Boulder. And I'm thrilled about the Create Boulder relationship with Bonfils Stanton. And Create Boulder, by the way, has raised their $20,000. So we now have $40,000 to represent the city. And my understanding is that they are working on making sure that at least that much money comes back to the city of Boulder in terms of grants to arts and cultural organizations. So hopefully a lot of our organizations are applying for that.
Yeah, we've been trying to communicate it and get everyone to apply. So
I noticed it was in the arts and cultural newsletter. So thank you. Okay, I just had a quick question. I know I asked this last meeting, but I noticed that there were a couple more rental assistance reports. And these were grants like the Future Arts Foundation and Greater Boulder Youth Orchestra, Concert at Mackey. Are these things that these were things that happened virtually, and for example, they did not perform at Mackey?
Lauren, you want to answer that question?
Yeah. So they all have varying degrees of things that happened. So they didn't perform at Mackey, they did virtual work, or some of them that you're seeing now were still before COVID. So some of them had part of it happen and then part of it was canceled. But they all converted their rental assistance grants into something that was a digital version or a version that would be, a digital version, or part of it happened before and then it was moved online.
Okay, so in terms of giving $1,000 for a Mackey grant, how does that work then? We give $1,000 out of our funding, or is it Mackey offering a grant of $1,000 that just comes through our office, through the Arts and Culture office? If I just wondered, like, if they didn't actually use the venue, then why would they get the money? That's what I wanted.
Because they still hosted their event, but it was online. So this is something that when we talked about permissions a couple months ago, they were still hosting something similar, but they shifted it as well as they could to a digital platform, right? And that's not changing the content of it. It's changing like the nature of it, the spirit of it. It's changing the location because of COVID specifically. So in those cases, when they shifted to something online, then we approved the shift, right? Like, so they received $1,000 when they applied for it in January to host it at Mackey, which we gave them. And then they used it to pay for, for example, the Future Arts Foundation, they paid and were out of $150,000 that they lost from booking all of their artists. Yeah, it's a massive show. It's a great show. But they did pieces of it online and virtually, and obviously they still lost a lot of the funding that they used for that. But that was the agreement that we talked about a couple months ago, which was allowing organizations to use it for their. Matt, do you want to add something?
I was going to wait until you're finished, but I do want to, add on to that and respond a layer deeper. Is that the way that the Mackey rental assistance is structured is that we have a contract with Mackey Auditorium to provide a certain number of free or rent-free events to our nonprofits, right? And so we distribute those. On top of that, we have Arts Commission funding because free rent at Mackey is actually very expensive for the needs of, hiring ushers and the technology and all of that. And so that additional $1,000 is the money we're talking about. They were not able to take the free rent from Mackey and leverage that money in any way. If they couldn't do their event at Mackey, that's not available. But the rental assistance fund, which funds those Mackey enhancement grants, as well as rent to anywhere else in the city, assistance for rent anywhere else in the city, that's the money that we allowed to be transferred to another venue, thus online. Yeah.
So we could think of that as some kind of COVID relief funding.
I think everything is COVID relief funding right now.
Yeah, I think for the next year and a half, I would consider all of it. Yes, but it's important to point out that some of the reports that you see come in will say Mackey, but they've been shifted, and I'm trying to fix it in our system and in our software, but because of the way that they overlap, or because, thanks for asking about it. But anything that the Mackey agreement that we have, they don't give us any money. It's all from the Boulder Arts Commission funding.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you for clarifying that. I know we went through this. And for some reason, I was confused about.
Yeah.
We perform at Mackey, then why did we give them the money? You know.
Kathleen, Kathleen, can I add something real quick?
Yeah.
I'm just sharing this with my fellow commissioners, just in case you guys aren't aware of this, guys and gals, that as Matt alluded to, when you get this free Mackey rental, it's not free at all. So as we evaluate grant applications, that's actually something that we should be looking for to make sure the organizations understand this as well. Because what I've learned recently is that the free rental is wonderful, but people need to go in knowing that they're going to be at least another couple $1,000s. I'd say probably a minimum of $2,000, if not more like $3,000 that they're going to need to come up with. You can't bring anybody else in to do your audio. You got to use their audio person. You got to use their lighting person. You can bring in video crew and stuff, but everything else has got to go through them. And, you know, the rates are actually fairly reasonable on a lot of the stuff. I was looking like to complain about, well, they're charging exorbitant rates and taking advantage of people, but I can't honestly say that. The rates seem fairly reasonable on most of the things I noticed. So yeah, I just wanted to make sure everybody was aware of that.
Great, thank you. Yeah, it can be very expensive. And you have to make sure that they have the rest of the budget for that, right? Yeah. Lauren mentioned.
I wonder, can I add something
go ahead,
really quick? I wonder if that's something, obviously it might not apply for the next year or two, but I'm wondering if that's something we can leverage with Mackey and or CU, some kind of collaboration with the Arts Commission, to where if that grant happens, maybe 1,000 can be kicked in from CU in some way to the community. Because I would echo Bruce's opinion that yes, a free rent is not, and even I agree 2,000 to 3,000 to rent a venue for the night is a good deal for a nice venue, but for a lot of organizations that's not possible. So I wonder if moving forward we could reach out to CU in some way to see if they can kick in some kind of rental assistance that at least equals what the city is providing.
Oh, Devin, that's like the coolest idea I've heard all day. I love that.
Yeah, is someone capturing that? You have it on public record, right?
I would
What'd you say, Kathleen?
I'm hoping we capture that idea and put that into the mix when we talk about grants at our retreat.
Lauren,
if nothing else, maybe like some special rates for people that have gotten this deal. Now it opens them up to maybe some discounted rates on certain things. I don't know, but I love Devin's idea of trying to get something going.
Lauren, can I respond to that real quick before you make your point? Okay, thank you. Absolutely, we can fold down the corner of the page on this as we lead up to October and talk with CU Presents. I will say two things. CU Presents has been a great partner, and that I think they'll be responsive. I don't know how they'll be able to help further, but we can certainly ask them and invite them to speak with you. I also want to make clear that I'm not sure that I am convinced of the continuing value of the Mackey Auditorium free rental relationship. I think very few organizations, even with free rent and our assistance, and even with more assistance, can fill Mackey and make it viable. As far as the venues at CU, the variety of programming, the relationships we might build with museums and performing arts theaters there, I'm not sure that Mackey is our best path forward. The relationship exists for a very good reason, and I don't want to dismiss it for a second, but as we have this conversation, I at least am one voice of skepticism that continuing to do Mackey rentals grants in the same way is going to be the best way to support the community. So, Lauren, you had a point to make too.
Well, now I have 3 points. Sorry. One is just that when I did an analysis last year of how much they were paying, generally it was closer to $5,000 or $6,000 because the organizations that are renting Mackey after a fee waiver, the organizations that are renting Mackey are hoping to completely fill it out. So they're paying for the balcony and like Bruce was saying, all the lighting and technicals, sometimes installing their own things. Second, we have a good relationship with the staff at Mackey, and they have sent this year, they've sent some of the people that received the fee waivers and things to us. They said, oh, did you know that the Arts Commission has this fee waiver? And that is where we saw a lot of them come in the last 2 years. So I just think it's, we've built a really good relationship with them, and we do have still 8 or 9 left, and part of that is because of COVID, but we have 16 total over the whole year that we can give, like fee waivers, right? A couple $1,000s out of the $5,000 or $6,000, and we generally use only 6 or 7 or 8 of them every year so far. I mean, maybe we'll get more or less. Maybe we'd get more, before, but it's just something to think about. Yeah. Thanks.
Well, and maybe something to add to that, especially based on Matt's comment, is that, sorry about that, is that maybe we want to connect with like the Boulder Theater. Let's look at some of the other venues that like Boulder Theater, for instance, brings in a lot of shows outside, but is prohibitive to its own community organizations. So I wonder if we can expand the Mackey thing to some other possible venues.
Has that ever happened? Have we ever tried talking to Cheryl?
Yeah, we have. I mean, we've been talking with all of our venues in town, and this is always a subject of conversation, is how do we support the community? I think we balance that especially with the for-profits, but even with CU Presents, of making sure that they continue to be sustainable. And so the conversation goes 2 ways, right? But what I will propose is that we revisit these kind of conversations, especially in the new circumstances. And as things begin to open up, I think that opens up opportunities for collaboration in ways that we haven't seen. So if I could be so bold as to ask for help in having those conversations, if someone wants to volunteer to talk to some of these groups with me. Devin, is that you? Sweet.
Yeah, and Bruce too.
Okay, great. Why don't the 3 of us reconnect on this soon and talk about some sort of strategy to approach particularly performing arts venues, but perhaps everyone, and talk about what we can facilitate. Because yeah, even though I'm not sure about the value of Mackey in specifically, I know that this is something important. It's mentioned in the cultural plan. These venues need to pay attention to them. So great.
I love that idea. Once again, Devin, you the man. I love that idea. Well, the Mackey's great, but the Fox and the Boulder Theater are so much more accessible to people. Maybe even talking to Jonathan over at the JCC, trying to get some arrangements going. There's no reason that we need to be exclusive, right? With CU.
Right. E-Town as well. It's expensive to rent E-Town. Yeah.
Yeah.
Unity, Georgia mentioned Unity. Certainly, a lot of the churches have rent out to a lot of performing groups, and they're generally less cost, but still, to the impact. Maybe it's not at all of them.
Yeah, and I would agree to answer that. I mean, like the JCC, Boulder Theater, prohibitively expensive, probably even compared to Mackey. But churches, on the other hand, they're already at a bare minimum, 500 to 700 to 1,000. I mean, they're basically probably getting costs at least from my experience, if you're talking musical venues anyway. But yeah, I think especially after COVID, it's going to be a new era of community collaboration. Organizations are going to need to work together in ways that we've never even imagined. So that might start with some of the venues that are more about sort of running themselves as a business, as being facilitated by the Office of Arts and Culture in new ways.
Great. Yep, let's continue this.
Great. So the next thing, I'm sorry, Matt is running the
No, Kathleen, I just wanted to ask if you wanted to take a quick break at this point. This is our typical break moment, or should we plow ahead?
I'm okay with plowing ahead, but would anyone like a break? Just put it in the chat, I guess. If we plow ahead, we could probably finish.
We can plow ahead.
Let's try and get done by 8 o'clock.
Let's
All
do
right.
it. Okay, let's do it.
Great. So the next question that we have before us is something that Kathleen and I were discussing and is appropriate for like this particular commission meeting, is revisiting the two sort of commission subcommittees that exist. The first is a sponsorship subcommittee. So we have a sponsorship program. It's implementing recommendations in the community cultural plan to fill in some gaps that the grants program necessarily creates. The grants program does a bulk of the funding, and it is the cornerstone of how that we interact with community funding. But there are opportunities that happen quickly. There are things that happen outside of the boundaries of the city of Boulder. And there's ways of spending money that are very effective to achieving our goals that the grants just can't do. And so the sponsorship program was established to do that. Some of the things we've done in the past, we've been continually sponsoring the Boulder County Arts Alliance Business for the Arts workshops, professional development for artists and arts leaders. We've been sponsoring activity in the Nobo Art District, some art in public places, temporary work, yeah, so and some marketing, sponsoring some conferences that come to town, like the Americans for the Arts conference that came, was that last year, the year before?
Year before.
The year before. So trying to make sure that we're spreading the word about the good work that we're doing. So that sponsorship program is something that is a collaboration between the Boulder Arts Commission and staff, and we generally have two arts commissioners who serve on that. Kathleen and Erica were most recently. We just wanted to revisit and see who would like to represent. It's not a regular meeting. It sort of comes up as sponsorships requests are received, and it's pretty light. We generally can resolve questions by email. Sometimes we have a phone call, or we've had a couple of meetings in the past as they're needed. So I just wanted to get quick volunteers for who would like to serve on the sponsorship subcommittee.
All right. Did you see my hand go up? This is Bruce.
Bruce, hello. Devin. Kathleen, you were on before. Were you interested as well?
I'm happy to turn that over to Bruce and Devin. I think they do a great job. So.
Great. That's okay with you, Mark, Georgia? Great.
What's okay?
To have Devin and Bruce on the subcommittee?
Sure.
For sponsorships? Yeah.
Great.
Okay. The other one is this public art standing selection panel. So according to the public art policy, each project requires a selection panel to do the work of identifying an artist. And then, as most of you have experienced, we then bring it to you for approval of the process. But there are a lot of projects that don't warrant creating a special community selection panel, especially projects that need to happen quickly, projects that are perhaps a lower budget, or the site is not specific and not associated with a parent project, and especially around donations, relocations, deaccessions, that type of work. And so we have a selection panel that is at the ready for Mandy to call upon to consult with and make decisions on to fulfill the public art policy. So in the past, we have had one commissioner serving on the public art standing selection panel. Mark, you've been in that position for a little while. We want to revisit that, but in conversation with Kathleen and with Mandy, we want to expand that to two. Helps make sure that there's continuity if a commissioner is ending their term, and there's someone who can keep going, and also share the load a little bit among commissioners. So we're looking for two people to serve on the public art standing selection panel.
And one of them, if Mark would like to continue, he would be on until he cycles off the commission.
Absolutely.
Well, I would like to continue, but that's all up to Mandy. If she's tired of me, I totally get it.
Mandy, if you'd like to weigh in on if you're tired of Mark.
Mark, I am not tired of you. And quite frankly, I really appreciate the leadership that you will bring to whomever decides to opt in next, because I know at this point, you and Kathleen are the only ones who have sat in on selection panels, let alone the standing selection panel. One thing I do want to add is that as of, well, just prior to COVID, we implemented a monthly call and then cut that off during COVID. But just because the volume of how many donations, deaccessions, community projects were coming through, just to focus when we can meet as a group, it felt best to have a permanently scheduled time for that.
And when do you see that resuming?
Well, and whoever decides
Yeah.
to be the second commissioner, it's a lot of fun. I mean, there's some very, very frank, honest talk and discussion about the donations and about the whole process. So it's a lot of fun.
Thanks for saying it's fun.
What?
I appreciate your choice of words. Thank you.
Well, I'm trying to be political. I'm trying to not stir anything up.
So Devin, Bruce, and Georgia, would any one of you like to take a seat on that standing panel? I'm not hearing it.
This is Georgia. On the what panel?
This is the standing selection panel for public art. So it's all the things that, we have a long list of public art that comes to the city, people who would like to donate their art, and it goes through a whole process. But the standing panel makes a lot of the big early decisions, and then it comes to us. Is that right? Have I got the process right? And then it comes to us for decision as a commission. But they do the early work, figuring out, what the issues are with the art, whether to recommend that we accept it or not. Is that hard to be describing this from Monday? You guys have been, doing the work.
What's the time commitment on it?
So that varies drastically, especially because a lot of these come in from the community, and so we can't specifically know in advance. That's why we moved it to the once monthly meeting. I know, for example, in 2019, we saw 8 donations that came through, and as Mark hinted at, some of those took some pretty lengthy conversation. Some of those were upwards to 4 meetings individually. We also run murals through it. I anticipate seeing some deaccessions through for 2020 from our current. So it might get a little tedious, but that's why we're trying to focus it once a month for an hour-and-a-half long meeting.
Are you asking me if I want to be on it to be inclusive, or are you asking because you need more volunteers?
Oh,
Okay.
yeah. Yeah, if it appeals to you and you'd like to try it, that's fine. There will be another opportunity though when Mark cycles off. We don't want Mark to go, but when he does cycle off the commission in the spring, and if we still want 2 people on the standing panel, there would be an opportunity then as well.
If I could say too, Georgia, I think you would do great and be a very thoughtful voice on the panel. It's entirely up to you on the time you think you can commit, but sort of getting your feet wet with public art in that way might be really interesting. But we would love to have you on that.
Yeah, I would no doubt love to do it. I'm just concerned about stretching myself too thin. I feel like I still need to spend more time figuring out who is who here and making sure I'm reading all of the packets that we get and making sure I get dinner done before the meeting happens. So,
Understandable.
yeah, I think it's going to be a hard pass for me right now, but I definitely am interested. But just for the sake of being, making sure that I do a good job, I'll have to.
Yeah, and I didn't mean to put you on the spot. I just want to offer the opportunity.
Okay.
Devin, does that appeal to you or Bruce?
Does that mean it's Bruce or me?
No, honestly, Mark will represent us, right? Matt, maybe Matt or Mandy wants to answer this. What happens if you don't have a second volunteer?
I strongly encourage it just because of the learning curve. the other comment that I wanted to bring up specifically for you, Georgia, is that in the fall, we're looking at an approval of the public art implementation plan, which will have all of the upcoming permanent projects. And we need a commissioner on individual projects at that point. So it's every single little project will need somebody there. But there is a lot of institutional knowledge that Mark has been able to build and glean and understand. And it's just a relatively high learning curve for kind of getting up to speed on standing selection panel. So that's why it would be great to have the perspective of two commissioners. Additionally, back in 2017 at the Arts Commission retreat, it was determined that certain projects aspects along those lines no longer need to come to the Arts Commission for final approval. Instead, it's just an update. And so because of those terms, it also feels beneficial to have two commissioners as perspective, since it doesn't actually get to the commission for a final vote. But you guys can think on it. There's nothing.
Yeah, I don't think we need to make. Yeah,
can,
I'm just going to jump in and say we don't need to make this decision right now. Mark, we will happily have you continue with us. And it's maybe something that we can revisit later on, perhaps with the public art implementation plan. And let's not forget, hopefully we're going to have 7 commissioners in the near future and spread this work out a little bit. Yeah.
Right. And I just wanted to put out there, Matt and Andy, that I would consider it, but I'm still getting a feel for what it means to be chair. And I just want to say again to Mark, it's such an amazing job. So I'm on the learning curve, and I appreciate all the help that you've given me. Anyway, I want to see what my time we'll revisit that then. Maybe at the retreat, if not before. Does that sound like a plan?
Yeah, sounds good to me. So are we ready to move on to the next agenda item then?
Yes. Are there any questions for Matt? We don't need to make a motion or a second. Is that correct?
No, that was just for volunteers, so we're good.
Okay.
Great. So the next item is a quick update on the budget process. We talked about the reductions that the entire all departments in the city of Boulder are going to have to take on, and that process is playing itself out. And the Office of Arts and Culture is part of that. We've been given proposals to the executive budget team, which have been accepted, about 10% of our budget. It may not be the last of the budget cuts that happen this year, depending on how things continue to develop. And I believe City Council is still getting weekly updates on the situation with the economy as well as the public health situation. So it'll continue to develop, but these are cuts for the arts division that we believe we can absorb pretty easily without much disruption to the services we're providing. So if anyone has any specific questions about that, I'd be happy to follow up, but just know that process has played itself out. Then the second part of this is that we're beginning actually tomorrow the process of designing the city manager's budget for next year, and the Library and Arts Department and Arts Division components of that. That also includes a request for 10% cuts, and so we are working through their executive budget team process to review those carefully. And so it'll be something that is a city council process involving several steps, study sessions, 2 public hearings. And typically in the past, council has made a final decision and the city manager's final budget gets adopted the day before our October retreat. So I'm kind of expecting that again, and we'll design our interaction with you around advice on our budget, and in particular the grants budget leading up to that. And I don't think we can not say that there's many people in the city employees in the city who have been experiencing furloughs. There have been some layoffs in order to meet this extremely challenging budget situation. We are very lucky the Arts Division hasn't seen that yet. But we have a lot of colleagues who are part of that, and our heart goes out to them. But we're doing important work, and we appreciate your support in all this, but we're just going to keep you informed as the steps in the budget process continue. So any questions about what we're doing next?
Well, I would like to say I was very relieved that granted for this first round, it was only a 10% cut. That sort of I breathed a sigh of relief, and there might be more cuts later, granted, but I took it as good news. And then you know what I'm going to ask next. Will 2021 see a public art position? Public art assistant position.
I left my crystal ball in my office, which is off limits to me right now. I apologize. I can't say. Executive budget team knows about the position and about the urgency.
You know, I love wearing that record out.
Yeah, please do.
Mark, this is David. We may have to make, we have heard the commission's desire to get that position filled, and so we will be proposing that in the budget. But we also may have to make ancillary cuts in order to make up the money in order to fulfill that position. So that's the hard part. Is we're not going to get. We have no anticipation of new money. So if we move forward with requesting that position and it's granted, then we'll have to make reductions in other areas. And those would not be personnel, but could affect all of other funds that the commission has access to. So
it's a delicate balance. It's in this time. I totally get it.
So one more thing on this, which I think is important for you all to have talking points on. As the community starts to hear about the budget cuts, I think a question you're all going to get is from our general operating support grant recipients about how this might affect next year's grant. And we don't know yet. But what we can say is that our practice, which we've never had to implement, but nonetheless have stated is our practice, is that the grants budget, the general operating support grants, would be conceivably reduced at the same rate as the rest of the division. And so that's a starting place. I'm not sure that's how this will play out, but one thing that they can start to plan for is if the city is being asked to propose 10% cuts, then perhaps general operating support grants would be reduced by that same amount. And please send people to us if they have questions. We're happy to talk about it.
Yeah, and it's still a big fat I don't know, right? But we
Correct.
Just don't know how it's going to play out.
Correct. Okay. Great. Well, if anyone has any further thoughts or questions, let me know. Happy to follow up.
I apologize, but I just saw Mandy's comment, and I wonder what she said. I have one more comment, but that was a few minutes ago. Mandy, did you already make the comment?
I was already able to speak about it being the individual selection panels for each project.
Okay.
So thank you.
Okay. And I did have one question about the budget. As you meet with the finance committee, I'm not sure exactly who you're meeting with to talk about how the budget changes. You drill down on the whole, universe of possibilities. Do you get with them, or are you talking big numbers with them?
No, Kathleen,
Cut down.
I think I heard your question, Kathleen. You are cutting out a little bit. So the process for budgeting, each year changes a little bit. But typically we are able to describe in detail what programs or staffing levels we would like to increase, and what amounts we're expecting and what impact we think that money will have. So it's a fairly robust meeting. we're given ample time to present, and they're given ample time to ask us questions. They don't make the decision at that moment, right? So they go back, and the executive budget team, which includes the city manager and the assistant city manager, as well as finance people and several others, then they go back and have the discussion as to what things they're going to be able to fund and or not. In this year, you know, in the context of COVID, we more or less had to submit everything for reduction. So we had to say, this is what the cut would be, this is what the impact on the community would be. And then we looked at everything also through a racial equity lens. So those were all the, so each proposal was like, I don't know, 5 pages. We turned those in, and that was not really, they did submit some questions. Some directors were called in to respond to different things. I was not. And I agree with Mark. I was surprised that the cuts for the arts were only 10%. We anticipated that they could be much higher than that. So, and for some departments they were. I mean, for the library they were higher than that. For Parks and Recreation, they were way higher than that. So, you know, it just varied from department to department depending upon what the needs were and what they could accomplish.
Okay, thanks. I just wondered whether, for example, they'll say, well, you're going to take a 10% or a 20% hit on your budget next year, but you get to decide how you spend that. Or whether, in fact, they actually look at the grants programs and advise you on which ones to keep and which ones to cut. And
No, it doesn't really work like that. They don't give us a number. Even the 10% number was one that was not really given to us in advance. They asked for more or less everything. So we had prepared, I mean, in the arts, we didn't plan to propose, 30% cuts. With regard to the library, we put forward much more significant things for reduction with an understanding of what we thought we might be able to do. So it varies from department to department, and most of those occur between conversations between the city manager and the deputy city manager and myself about what they're expecting.
all right, thank you. Look forward to hearing more. Are there any other issues that we need to discuss tonight?
Well, I realized that I put the nonprofit stabilization fund on the agenda at the end, and I already talked about it, so I won't repeat myself other than encourage organizations in your networks to apply. June 26th is the deadline.
Okay, great. Thank you.
An announcement. First of all, Mandy, that email was incredible. What you guys have been doing in the community, that's a lot of work. I'm very impressed. On those coattails, Kate and I joined the National Arts Drive, which is this nationwide, get your art in your front yard, show it to your neighbors, show all your neighbors how many artists are living in the community. Possibly you can sell something, it's no cost to any artist. So we joined this Saturday from 2 to 5. My front yard is going to be full of my abstract paintings and my wife's ceramics.
Oh.
And at 2 o'clock, we're going to have the Boulder Philharmonic have a couple of violins. And I think, I haven't heard from Devin yet, but I was hoping for the symphony at the 4 o'clock hour. And we'll have some dancers from the Boulder Ballet in our front yard.
We're working on it.
Would you like to send us all your address so we could swing by? Is it 2 to 5 on Saturday?
It's 2 to 5 on Saturday. My address is 4140 Evans Drive, Boulder. And anything that we sell, we're going to donate back to the arts community 100%.
Wow. Well, that's great.
My paintings will be severely discounted, but it's all going to go back into the arts community.
That's great.
It's fantastic, Mark.
That is great, Mark.
You're not going to pay the gallery markup.
All right. Thank you for letting us know about that. Hope to see you there. Do we have any other?
And thank you, Mark, for providing opportunities for the arts community.
Yeah, it's going to be fun.
Thank you. You're inspiring all of us. Maybe we'll all put art on the front yards. Okay, if that's it, then do we have a motion to adjourn? Would anyone like to make a motion to adjourn?
Sure, I will. This is Bruce.
Okay, thank you, Bruce. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Okay, thank you, Mark. Okay, so we hereby, I don't have a gavel, but I'll knock my cup on. The meeting is now adjourned. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Good night, all. Thank you very much.
See you guys.
Thanks for all the work, everyone.
Hi, guys.